All done then. Sweet moment for Chiteshwar Pujara as he hits the winning runs in his 100th test to give India a 2-0 lead in this four-match series. They retain the Border Gavaskar Trophy. They have more than a foot now, you think, in the final of the World Test Championship, all on the back of yet another third-day collapse by Australia in their second innings. They lost 9 for 52 in the first session on day 3, and it'll again provoke some serious talking points after what we thought was an improved batting effort from Pat Cummins' side in the first innings. On ESPN Cricket for Matchday to look back at it all, we've got Aakash, Chopra, and we've got Shaun, Tait. I think I have to start with Ian Chappell. Penny for your thoughts, Chappell, and what you saw this morning from Australia with the bat.
Very, very disappointing, Raunak, especially after last night, with the scores being virtually equal. And I thought that Australia batted very bravely on the second evening. They attacked the Indian spinners, and I think they had them a little rattled. Field placings they were struggling with. They couldn't contain the Australian batsmen. And I was thinking, well, if they can produce, I mean, you've got to be aggressive but thoughtful in India. So I was hoping that we'd see more of that from the Australian batsmen. But what we saw was disgraceful attempts to sweep, missing the ball by a long way, getting the stumps hit. And you lose 9 wickets in a session. I haven't found too many teams that win by losing that many wickets in a session. It was a pitiful batting performance today.
Aakash, that first
absolutely. What Ian has actually said, it's absolutely correct. And we discussed this last night that Australia came out attacking Indian spinners. They were slightly rattled. They were running out of ideas, wanted to attack, but then over-attacked maybe. But you obviously expected a bit more discipline on the third morning. That's what happens when you have the entire day in front of you. And we also expected Australia to bat a lot better. But that was not to be. And if you have only one go-to shot against spin, I think the problem starts there. If you're just going to sweep and there is no other shot that you're going to employ to actually survive and score, then sooner or later on a surface like this, you will eventually get out. Like before, bowled, top edging something. And that's how it all actually unfolded. And let me just go ahead and like a step further and say they've not just lost this test match. Honestly, that first session, I think they've lost the series now completely, because it will take a Herculean effort for Australia to now bounce back from here. If Indore is again a turning sort of surface, if it's a flat track, we can expect a draw or something. But if it is a turning pitch, Australia will find it mighty difficult.
Yeah, what I'm finding odd, Teddy, is the fact that they had improved significantly in this test in the first innings, and they were arguably ahead last evening. They get to 200 or so today and give India 250, 300 to chase. Could be a completely different game. I'm surprised how it's all just fallen apart so quickly when the momentum seemed to be with them. Can you explain that?
Explaining is a tough thing, but I think, last night, Aakash and myself, I think we agreed the 250 chase would have been made for a good test match. I don't think, if we're really honest, I don't think the result is surprising. India winning the test match. It's not a great surprise. I think it's just the way it unfolded is a surprise. And like Ian said, after last night, Australia sort of wrestled the momentum back in their dressing room with the way they played, the way they attacked. And obviously batting in the morning, the first hour seems to be quite difficult in these conditions. And they just couldn't get through that. I think the disappointment is just the way they went about it. This obsession to sweep, I suppose, has sort of come undone a little bit. But at the same time, India are obviously playing very well too.
I just want to add a small thing,
yes.
Just a small thing actually. The first session, actually, the first hour should be a good time to bat, generally. And maybe what we saw in the last session, or rather last 12 overs on day 2, there is a significant impact that roller can make for a little period of time, brief period of time, but it can actually make an impact where it makes the pitch slightly better to bat and not so much tougher to bat. So then it's even more inexplicable how Australia actually just folded completely.
Yeah, so the term Teddy uses, Chappell, obsession to sweep. Do you sense that this was a really badly thought plan from the entire batting unit, that we've got to get quick runs today? It worked. They did all right last evening, but when I see Pat Cummins, even though he's a number 8 batter, crucial runs in the lower order have made the difference in this series. Pat Cummins comes out swinging first ball. It looks pretty ugly. I'm just trying to think whether they got the plan wrong or were they just confused.
Well, I think there's too much bollocks talked about planning. I mean, as an individual, you've got to play your game and you've got to understand your game. And I think a lot of it stemmed from the fact that I believe there's quite a few Australian players who don't really trust their defence on these turning tracks against these Indian spinners. And if you don't trust your defence in those circumstances, then you can be panicked into doing something that is not natural. And I think when you see Steve Smith, for one, attempting a big sweep and miss by a long way, you sort of think to yourself, Steve, that's not your game. And then you see how Rohit Sharma played. I mean, Rohit Sharma was playing beautifully. Sure, he swept one ball, but he did it very cleverly. And he basically forced the off-spinner Nathan Lyon into bowling a little short, and then he just gave it a little paddle sweep. That to me is intelligent type batting. I didn't see the intelligence. And, I mean, I've heard some people who are supposedly coaches or giving directions about batting, I've heard them say that relying on the sweep shot is the answer to play spin bowling. Well, either they've never played spin in India or they're talking through their hat, because I mean, the odd person sweeps very well and he can do it in India and still do it well in India. But the bulk of batsmen don't need to sweep or shouldn't be sweeping very often in India. And if somebody tells you that, you should tell them to go and count the cricket balls and make sure you don't lose any, and don't come back until the test match is all over.
What I'm also surprised, if I take and Chappell's point is a good one, because Australia batted so well the last time they were here. Smith batted well. I'm trying to understand what's changed in this span of time. Teddy, you remember Australia? They came back. They gave India a real fight. They drew the test at Ranchi. They beat India at Pune, and we thought, this is a team that's seriously going to challenge. It's similar set of batters, but they don't seem to be batting the same way anywhere near.
No, just on that, what we were talking about before as well. Every time the Australian team comes to India now, there's a lot of talk about Matthew Hayden, the way he went about, and it was always talking about sweep, sweep, sweep. One thing is he worked extremely hard on it, but he's also a big man, so getting down to the ball was a bit easier for him. And the other thing with Matt Hayden was he actually did come out of his crease and hit the ball down the ground as well. So a lot of and he had a great defence. So a lot of his game, it wasn't only based on sweeping from memory. Haydos used to come and meet the ball down the wicket too. So just on that, I think Australia seemed to get caught up in this talk about the success Hayden had when he changed his game to come to India, but it wasn't only about the sweep. But yeah, on the Australian batting from last time to now, I mean, again, what Ian said before as well, this the whole planning thing, it's this thing where you got to plan perfectly. It doesn't seem to be working for Australia either. And there's not a lot of time anymore to send players to the subcontinent to train and like they used to do, because there's so much cricket going on. There's so much 2020 stuff. So to get A teams out to the subcontinent or get players to the MRF camp to train, it's also been a tough thing, which I think they used to be able to do. They had a bit more time to prepare for the subcontinent, where now there's so much cricket, there's just not that time.
Yeah, I think they also decided not to play the tour game. They also employed a clone to bowl like Ashwin. Not sure that worked after the evidence of 2 test matches. But shall we give praise to India's spinners? It seems like in the review show of the last test and this one, Aakash, that while I want to praise India for their bowling, it doesn't seem like there was anything extraordinary done. The story was more about how Australia just self-destructed. But where did India get everything right today?
Okay, just a couple of things on the previous discussions as well. When you talk about sweeping, Indians bat in Indian conditions, and who comes to your mind as a good sweeper of the cricket ball in the last 20 years? Start from Rahul Dravid to Sachin Tendulkar to VVS Lakshman to whoever actually you can think of. They've scored thousands of runs without sweeping, so I think that should put that debate to bed, that you don't need to really sweep to score runs. There are other ways. That's point one. Secondly, I also feel that barring that Pune test match, the pitches were a lot better. In the previous series, pitches were meant to last 5 days. Test matches were meant to last 5 days. Those were the kind of surfaces. Ranchi actually produced a draw. The only 2 draws that we have had in the last 6 years. One was in Kanpur and the other was in Ranchi. Ranchi involved Australia, where Smith who started brilliantly in Pune and then just continued in that rich vein of form. These are tough batting conditions. Honestly speaking, the numbers are plummeting and how. And it is not just down to the Australian batting, it's Indian batting as well. I think in the last 3 years, batting averages in India 23. And if you were to take away Ashwin, Akshar, Jadeja contribution, you'll find top 5 must be 15 or 16 or 18. You can't find runs from the top order, be it the Indian team or the visiting team. This is not a great story. But so what do you have to do on these surfaces as bowlers? You just need to put the ball there. And there is enough purchase if you get the right speed to bowl at. And that is why Jadeja ultimately becomes far more dangerous as compared to Ravichandran Ashwin, but man to man in a sense of just the skill set with the things that you can do with the ball. With a red ball, you'll say Ashwin perhaps is a bit more skillful, but it's Jadeja who will do the damage because he's just too quick. His natural pace is the optimum pace at which one must bowl to get the maximum out of the surface, and that's what they're doing. There is Akshar Patel in the side; he doesn't even get to bowl, and still the opposition is getting bowled out in less than 2.5 days.
It's the template that's been so successful for India. You think every visiting side coming to India, Chappell, wants that, don't they? That's what the England team of 2012 had, the last team to beat India in a test series. They replicated the impact of their spinners through Swan and Panesar. No team's being able to manage that. I mean, Australia tried with Steve O'Keefe and Nathan Lyon last time, and number of teams have tried. Whichever set of spinners come from a visiting team, they don't seem to replicate the impact of Ashwin and Jadeja.
I think too often they do try and replicate their skill set. Now, talking of Ashwin and Jadeja, they bowled a lot in India. They know exactly what to do in India. If you look at Ashwin, he's a damn fine bowler. It doesn't matter where he bowls. I've seen him bowl in Australia. He bowls extremely well. But Ashwin's also very smart, and he works out exactly what he's got to do. Jadeja doesn't vary too much, although I think he's learned a few things and he's improved his bowling. But he's got the skill set that is perfect for India, and the two of them work together. Aakash is right. I mean, in this game, I thought Ashwin bowled bloody well, but Jadeja got the 7 wickets. But that's the way it happens some days. But I don't think you can come and try and replicate what they do. Whatever you are as a bowler, Nathan Lyon is not R. Ashwin. He's got to bowl like Nathan Lyon, and I think he has pretty well tried to do that. Australia, I don't know what they were trying to prove with Kuhnemann, but what I saw of Kuhnemann, I don't think he's going to frighten too many Indian batsmen. So you look at Kuhnemann coming into the side ahead of Agar, and you think to yourself, well, Agar must be bowling really badly if suddenly Kuhnemann's a better option than he is. So I think there was a bit of panic in the Australian camp, and whoever made the point about this really damaging their psyche for the next test match is exactly right, because I think having got level and having played really well last night, they were probably thinking, right, we're in a good space, and if we can push home from here and win the series, we're right back in it, and we're mentally up with India. Now they're way back there, way behind India mentally.
Right. I mean, if we are sort of looking ahead and talking about the next test, do we at all sympathise, Terry, with Australia's selection concerns, injury concerns? Because they still had their best batting, fair to say.
Well, it's been a bit of a complication. Like, it's almost like the series has been sprung upon the selection panel. They got a few injuries in the camp. They're talking about Agar's out of form. I mean, the selector came out before the test match and said his red ball bowling is not where he thinks it should be. So he's on tour though. So they've had time to get this stuff sorted out, and now it's like they've had a panic, or they've complicated things. That the Head missing the first test match, then coming back in, then Warner gets concussed, Head goes to open instead of Renshaw, who traditionally was an opening batsman. So I think playing one fast bowler. I know Green, he's not fit, and it would be handy if they had the all-rounder fit. But maybe going back to the basics and just picking the guys that you think are going to do a good job, which obviously is what they've tried to do. But it just looks like the Australian camp with their selection has been complicated and unsure.
All right.
So going forward to the next Test match, I mean, it's a bit of who knows what they're going to do.
All right. We'll pick up that chat closer to the Test. From India's point of view, though, with how easily Ravindra Jadeja has just regained a purple patch in Test cricket after time away, we almost underappreciated Aakash that he spent so much time away. He came back with runs and a 5-wicket haul in Nagpur. He's got his career best figures today. This is some comeback from Jadeja.
Oh, yes, it is. And to be fair, it felt as if he never went away. There was one series where he wasn't available at home. That was against England, where Akshar was taking 5 wickets every time he rolled his arm over. Every time. I think 5 or 6 fifers he had in those 3 or 4 Test matches that we played. So now Akshar is not getting to bowl. Ravindra Jadeja is at his very best. What has changed as in him as a player, not as a bowler as much, because he's been like this for a very long time. He's made those subtle changes that will always happen when you see a player's evolution, that he now bowls slightly closer to the stumps. Doesn't mind actually bowling a little slower as well, so that he's finishing closer to the stumps and slower. So 2 things that changes the line and the trajectory. It's his batting, I think, which has made him the player that he is right now. Because just the confidence in his complete skill set, the entire package, has just made him a player who's got this immense self-belief. You throw him in. He actually batted, I think, 4 or 5 in England and scored runs. He comes out to bowl. He picks up wickets on day one, which wasn't his forte in the first half of his Test career. Always looked to bowl on those dusty pitches, 4th, 5th day. But here he's willing to just experiment, bowl a little slower, come closer, change angles, and the batting. In my opinion, it's his batting that has made him the super confident Jadeja that we see now.
All right. As we look back at this Test, it ended quickly, but there were so many defining phases and moments. It's easy to look at this morning's session, Chappell, on 9 wickets falling. You think that's when a Test match is most defined or decided. But if you had to pick your most pivotal sort of period of this Test, where would you rate Akshar Patel's partnership and that lower order partnership where India was staring at possibly a 100-run deficit, and the first 2 innings eventually cancelled each other out? Do you think that was a more significant period of play, or did Australia just not recover from this morning?
Well, I think they were both significant. Certainly the partnership between Akshar Patel and R. Ashwin, that, Australia at that point were on top, and they had a chance to really get their mental state in a good position, being on top of India. If they'd have led by 100, as Tait says, you set somebody 250 to get in the 4th innings on that pitch, it's going to be really tough. But suddenly, India got up level. So that partnership was very important for India. And then the 9 wickets. You just can't be losing 9 wickets in a session if you're going to be competitive in a Test match. And it was not just the 9 wickets, it was the way they lost the 9 wickets, the ridiculous sweeping and missing sweeps by a margin. And as I've said before, sometimes you look at a player and you see him sweeping and you think this is sweeping in panic. And there's a few Australian players I'm seeing come straight in and they're panicking, they're sweeping. As I've said before as well, with India, it's the survival of those first 10, 15 minutes when sometimes you think to yourself, where's my next run coming from? You've got fielders all around you, but you've got to find a method to get through that period, and then things get a little easier. But that is only if you trust your defence, and I think that's one of Australia's major problems in batting.
Aakash, most defining periods for you in this Test match?
I think that Akshar Patel innings, because if it wasn't for that innings, India would have conceded a huge lead, and then you just add those 60-odd runs. That wouldn't have been 60-odd runs. That perhaps would have been 120. And India, the way we are batting, the top 5 actually, even chasing 115. Heart is always pumping quite faster, and it's almost close to your like heart is in your throat half the time. That what is happening? So 120, 180, 190. I mean, 190 would have been a huge total to chase, considering the way we have batted. So Akshar Patel, for me, yes, what happened this morning was quite eventful. Difficult to actually top it, but I think that Akshar Patel's inning was the defining part.
Teddy?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be the last half an hour last night, the Australian batting. I thought that was going to be the most defining part of the Test match. The way Head came out and played, it just switched so quickly to the hour this morning. So that period of time last night, what could have been, I think, for Australia. And then what ended up happening. It'll be interesting to see going into the next test if they talk about the way they batted in the evening before stumps last night, and if they take any of that attitude and intent into the next test match.
All right. Can't possibly see a way back here, you think, now after everything that we've discussed. Chappell, India favourites to seal this 4-0 now?
Oh, you'd have to have India favourites to win 4-0. I must admit that I thought the Australians were pretty brave in that, particularly the period in the evening of the second day, but also being in an equal position after one innings. I thought that was quite brave, but then they totally lost their way. And as we've spoken about before, coming back from it mentally is going to be very, very difficult. And you've got to do it not just once, but you've got to do it twice. On that basis, you'd have to say India, not knowing what's going to happen with the weather, but you'd have to say India, big chance for 4-0.
Aakash?
Indore can actually produce a great batting surface. Don't read what Fox Cricket has tweeted with regards to Ashwin's average, because India has played only 2 test matches there. It is a surface where we've seen white ball double hundreds and runs galore. So I'd be curiously watching how the pitch is, because if there is going to be one draw in this entire series, that is going to be that game. But yes, Australia are completely played out now. Like they are out of this contest. It will take some effort to actually bounce back, win a test match or draw a test match. In all likelihood, 4-0 India.
Teddy, you see that happening?
It seems that way. I mean, indoors, I've played one 2020 match at indoor. I got smashed all over the park. It's a tiny ground, so being a small ground, maybe that attacking approach is going to come off for Australia. But I mean, it does certainly look that way. I think if it is a bit more of a flatter surface, I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to look towards your star players. India, they still look towards Rohit to make the runs, or Kohli. I think Australia, Steve Smith and Marnus, they've got to stand up and get the runs for Australia.
All right. So then, to just perhaps put things in perspective, there'll always be chat on the pitch, and when the scorecard reveals that a test match has ended in 3 days, we tend to look at a pitch critically. Shall we look at this one, though? Was this a good pitch? Just another typical Indian pitch? Aakash Chopra, how would you rate this surface at Delhi?
I do feel that these pitches are too heavily skewed in favor of the spinners. You need to have a bit more for the batters. Batting cannot just be about survival or an absolute test every single time you walk out to bat. Survival is tough. Defense is the only option to survive, and then find like various ways. You have to be brave. These are good qualities to have, and we all appreciate that. But surfaces need to be a little better for the batters from both sides. See, if India were scoring 450 and Australia were getting bowled out for 150, you would say, pitches are all right. You don't know how to bat. But if you are also struggling on the same kind of surfaces, then a bit more favorable to the batters is what I would expect. So 6.5, 7 out of 10, not more than that.
Teddy, on this surface?
I think, I mean, both the test matches have been great to watch. I know that's one thing. So if it's, if it's still entertaining and good to watch and intriguing, I'm still going to give it a 7, 7.5, the same as the last test match. I don't think they've come out day one turning absolutely square. So that's happened in the past, and I don't think that's been the case this series as much. So I'm still going to give it a decent rating.
Chappell, final word with you on the surface.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty typical Indian surface. I go back to 1969 when we toured there, and before the Delhi Test match, which would have been the third, and in those days it was the Ferocia Kotler, and somebody said there's going to be a day's fishing in Delhi, and Bill Lawry, who was captain of the Australian side, said he's wrong. There's going to be 2 days fishing, and so that was over in about 3 days. So I'd have to say that it's pretty well what you expect in India. And I think if you look at the batting of Rohit Sharma, I mean, he was terribly run out in that second innings, but Sharma looked very comfortable in both innings, got knocked over in the first innings, but he showed that batting sensibly was possible. So, I mean, you're not going to give it 10 out of 10, but I think 7 out of 10 is fair because it's what you expect in India.
All right, a couple of days of fishing then for this Australian side. This test match is done inside 3 days, and we look forward to the company of Aakash Chopra, Shaun, Tait, and Chappell as the series heads to Indore. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts, and more coming up on ESPN Cricket for Match Day. Thank you.